This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. This is your show for September 6th, 2016, and I'm your host, Darren McKee. With me, as usual, are Adam Gardner.
Peace out for her rhomboids.
Cristina Roach.
Hello.
And producer Pat.
Hi, everybody.
We have three interesting segments for you, as usual. Cristina is going to examine the saintliness of Mother Teresa, and Adam is going to look into whether we can tell what kids want to be when they grow up. But first, last week, many headlines carried a story about whether dogs can understand human speech. This is a sampling of headlines. Science confirms, dogs understand us, but do we get them too? That's from The Guardian. Research shows dogs really do understand humans. This is from The Voice of America. Your dog really does know what you're saying. Washington Post. Dogs understand what you're saying, not just the sound of your voice, and Gadget, and your dog really does understand what you're saying. New York Daily News.
Oh, boy.
And this is just the first little bit from the opening lines of the Washington Post piece by Karen Bouillard. Your dog gets you. I mean, he really gets you. No, really, he actually does. So say scientists in Hungary, who have published a groundbreaking study that found dogs understand both the meaning of words and the intonation used to speak them. Put simply, even if you use a very excited tone of voice to tell the dog he's going to the vet, he'll probably see through you and be bummed about going. Well, now, based on all that, I can't help but think that, no, really, a dog would understand what I'm saying. But is this true? Dogs obviously respond to human speech, but do they understand what you're saying? I'm sure every dog owner has some story of their dog reacting to something they've said, probably related to going outside, chasing a ball, a treat, the vet, or being a good boy. But is a dog really understanding what you're saying or just reacting to your tone, or perhaps has just learned it through association and conditioning? To figure this out, researchers at the University of Budapest had 13 family dogs sit totally still for 7 minutes so they could have their brain activity measured in an fMRI scanner.
That on its own must have been a huge...
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, getting a dog to, or 13 dogs to sit still for 7 minutes.
Exactly. So for those curious, from the methods paper, there were 4 breeds, 6 border collies, 5 golden retrievers, 1 German shepherd, and a Chinese crested. There's also a partridge in a pear tree, but that was a different segment.
I don't know what the Chinese whatever is, but the rest seem like pretty well-behaved, trainable dogs.
Exactly.
In my mind.
They were aged 1 to 12 years, mean of 5. There's 7 females and 6 males. The Washington Post said that, quote, a female trainer familiar to the dogs then spoke words of praise that all of their owners said they used. Examples, that's it, clever, and well done, and neutral common words such as yet and if, which the researchers believed were meaningless to the animals. Each dog heard each word in both a neutral tone and a happy attaboy tone. Note that since this was in Budapest, the words were actually Hungarian, and you're getting a translation.
Oh.
Lest you think they understand English words, these dogs. Now, by the way, did anyone catch that line about meaningless words? This is also from the methods section of the paper. We selected praise words that, based on an open-ended questionnaire, were used by all test dog owners. The term neutral, in quotes, is used here as a synonym for meaningless to the dogs, or non-praising and not otherwise marked. Those are in quotes also. Now, certainly to humans, yet, as if, and such have meaning. These words have meaning to us. They indicate different durations of time or other context cues. So this is the first hint that maybe some of those headlines at the beginning are a bit overblown. As if, says a dog that wouldn't understand that. Now this is from The Guardian, as quote, the results revealed that compared to neutral words, praise words resulted in an increase in activity in the left hemisphere of the brain for both types of intonation, high and neutral. Suggesting that, like humans, dogs use the left side of their brain to process words that they have recognized and attach meaning to. On the other hand, differences in intonation, but not word type, resulted in a change in activity in an area within the auditory region of the right hemisphere. So you probably still have questions about what exactly that means.
Yeah.
But if you picture it, there's 4 kind of conditions. Neutral tone, positive tone, and then other types of neutral words and so-called meaningful words.
Yeah.
And they did all of them. And then what they found is, it seems like the brain reacts on the left side even with a neutral tone versus just a high tone, because they're trying to separate out tone versus meaning. That's the goal. Julie Hecht wrote a great little piece at Scientific American where she said that this study raises important questions about the difference between understanding human speech and processing it. The Science article, where this whole paper was originally published, had the title, Neural Mechanisms for Lexical Processing in Dogs. That's a very sciencey term, but they're not going to use the word understanding. Mm-hmm. She emailed Adam Miklosi, one of the study's authors, and quotes him in her article, as I shall now. Understanding is a tricky word. Studies using brain imaging technology cannot firmly say that the activation of a specific brain area indicates understanding. No. For sure, dogs in this study reacted to the meaningful words, that is, to those words that their owners often use when they want to attract the dog's attention or provide a positive feedback for the dog. So in this sense, our dogs recognize these words as familiar and probably meaning something good. Further, he said, quote, the other important aspect of our study is that the left brain of the dogs process the meaningful words independent from the intonation. This means that the brain could probably recognize that good dog is the same expression independent of how it was said. Mm-hmm. Say it in a positive tone, say it in a negative tone, the dog might recognize good dog and what that means. Mm-hmm. Now, most people probably care about whether their dog understands them. Is it fair to think that the results from these dogs generalize? First, not all dogs are equal. Heck, we complain about undergrads often being poor representations for the rest of humanity when they're used in psychology experiments. So why wouldn't a similar complication exist with dogs? Further, these dogs were trained over months to be able to sit still in that fMRI scan. Many, many hours of training with words and objects and to be able to sit. Is this how you interact with your dog every day? Probably not. In Scientific American, Hecht quotes a piece she wrote for the magazine The Bark that explored if dogs understand our words. She wrote this a couple of years ago. And I think this is a good little story. That's why she requoted herself. Patricia McConnell, PhD, certified applied animal behaviorist, shared this enlightening story about trying to figure out whether her dog Willie knew the name of her partner, Jim. To teach Willie, I would say, where's Jim? And Jim would call Willie over. When Willie consistently went to Jim, I'd say it as Jim was driving up, and Willie would run to the window.
Oh.
One day, Jim was sitting on the couch, and I said, where's Jim? And Willie ran to the window, all excited. This
Willie.
difference in definitions is more common than people realize. Dogs don't have the exact same concept of words that we do.
So it makes an association with the behavior, but it's maybe not totally the one you expected.
So dogs can learn many, many words, especially nouns. There's a dog, supposedly you can learn 1,000 of them.
Yeah.
They also, most dogs, are responding highly to context cues. How your body moves, what time of day it is, and all these sorts of things. If you say bedtime to a dog, it's usually night and you probably have your night clothes on. If you say it in the middle of the day, that'd be a good test, and then we'll see if the dog can understand. But there's a lot of context cues that are picked up. Now, it's not to say these dogs aren't picking anything up, because that's exactly what they found out. But I am a bit skeptical of the larger generalization or meaning for this. Number one, because currently I think psychology studies are 50-50 whether they're true. And that's this. So just flip a coin. There's already that problem. And then the fMRI studies are even more problematic because of how they're looking at different lights in the brain and what those signify. I do think some dogs can understand some words, and it makes sense that some dogs are differentiating, yes, intonation and meaning, so there's some type of understanding there. Mm-hmm. But even when you're talking about people, what do you mean by understand? If you say, oh, I understand you, like, what do you mean by that? Well, I get what you mean. What does that mean? And you start to get into this nebulous world unless you have more precise, operationalized definitions scientifically. So I'm sympathetic of who knows what understanding means at all unless you specify from the beginning. And some dogs might be demonstrating that. But whether the average dog is really picking up on most of the things you say, not at all. Which is why I thought most of those headlines were terrible. Because you're using the word really repeatedly. No, they really understand you. Versus they intermittently sometimes understand you for the words that you consistently use over many months that are also paired with context and association.
Cristina, imagine saying to Holden, good dog, but with the same voice that you would say to him, did you eat the cat's food?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We, a couple of years ago, our dog was gaining a little bit of weight, and we didn't understand why, and we were being conscientious, and we took him back to the vet, and the vet said he gained 2 pounds, and we're like, what the hell's going on? We found out he was sneaking into the basement when the door was open and eating the cat's food. So
Bad
take
dog.
a little video. I think it would be worth posting. When we say to Holden, did you eat the cat's food? He will cower down and just get as small as possible and cover his face.
But I think you could say almost anything with the same tone, and
Right.
it would react similar.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
speaking of understanding, some people think Mother Teresa's a saint, and some people couldn't possibly understand why that might be. Cristina, enlighten us.
A couple of days ago, Catholic nun Mother Teresa, who died in 1997 at age 87, was declared a saint in a canonization mass held by Pope Francis in the Vatican. Having been raised in a Catholic household, I can tell you guys, this is a big deal. In truth, she was already considered or referred to as a saint by many, but now it's official. The Albanian-born nun, whose real name was Agnes Gonje Boyaju, became famous worldwide and received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1979 for her work undertaken in the struggle to overcome poverty and distress. The popular opinion about Mother Teresa is that she was a selfless person who devoted her life to helping the poor and the dying in India. So many of you may be wondering why you're seeing so many negative headlines pop up about her lately. I ran across a post on reddit.com's Explain Like I'm 5 subreddit where someone asked, I keep seeing posts about her and I don't get what she did that was so bad it would cancel out all the good she did. Good question. Now, for those familiar with the work of Christopher Hitchens, this isn't exactly breaking news. In 1994, he did a documentary titled Hell's Angel, challenging Mother Teresa's saintly image and scrutinizing her campaigns against contraception, abortion, and her relationships with right-wing political leaders. He also released a book in 1995 called The Missionary Position, Mother Teresa in Theory and Practice, and was featured on an episode of Penn and Teller's Bullshit titled Holier Than Thou. However, a 2013 study out of the universities of Ottawa and Montreal shined a spotlight back on the controversy, concluding her image didn't stand up to the facts and was more the result of a media campaign by the Catholic Church to boost its ratings, so to speak, which you can imagine is not a popular conclusion to many religious people who vehemently defend her. For now, let's ignore the whole notion of what canonization is, which is based on miracles. And let's also ignore that the process has been so fraught with corruption and mismanagement that even Pope Francis recently made changes to the financial side of saint-making, ordering more vigilance and transparency and controls on the expensive process, which can range from $50,000 to over $250,000. I'm just going to give you guys a quick Coles Notes of the study, but if you want to dig deeper to draw your own conclusions or watch any of the videos I mention, I encourage you to check out the links in the show notes at trcpodcast.com.
Great website.
The researchers examined 287 documents on the life and work of Mother Teresa. One of the biggest criticisms is the misappropriation of funds received by her charity. As study co-author Geneviève Genal says, quote, all the money served to build houses for the sisters of her order or was sent to the Vatican. Nothing was given to the poor. This is something covered in Hitchens' documentary as well, how donations were used to push the Catholic agenda and support religious conversion. So even though her charity reportedly received millions in donations to help the poor, the conditions under which people were being cared for drew extensive criticism from the medical community at large due to the appalling shortage of actual medical care. The press release issued via the Nobel Committee when Mother Teresa was awarded the Nobel Prize stated, quote, a feature of her work has been respect for the individual human being, for his or her dignity and innate value, end quote. However, the doctors who visited her dubbed homes for the dying in India were really disturbed at the significant lack of hygiene, shortage of any actual real medical care, inadequate food or nutrition, and scarce analgesics for those in pain.
It's horrible.
It is horrible. The suffering within her facilities was defended by Mother Teresa, who was firm in her belief that the sick must suffer like Christ on the cross and that the world gains from their suffering. In reality, as many people have argued, the donated funds could have had transformative effects on the health of the poor by creating advanced palliative care facilities in the city. Even during major crises in India, she offered many prayers and medallions of the Virgin Mary, but no direct or monetary aid. Just as an aside, the researchers also pointed out that when Mother Teresa required palliative care, she received it in a modern U.S. hospital. She also forged questionable relationships with political leaders, including right-wing Haitian dictator Jean-Claude Duvalier, who she critically received money from, and flew to Haiti even to accept the Legion of Honor, the highest French order for military and civil merits. This is at a time when she had to be aware, like the rest of the world, that thousands of Haitians were being killed or tortured under his presidency. Duvalier was found to have stolen millions of dollars from his impoverished country to support a lavish lifestyle and was actually ousted in 1986. The other major criticism is Mother Teresa's hard stance and dogmatic views on abortion and contraception, which became somewhat of a global crusade. In her Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech, she called abortion, quote, "the greatest destroyer of peace. It is a direct war, a direct killing, a direct murder by the mother herself," end quote.
Hey.
On a visit to Ireland, she stated, "Let's promise Our Lady, who loves Ireland so much, that we will never allow in this country a single abortion." Finally, to become a saint, you need to be responsible for 2 posthumous miracles. The study investigates the first so-called miracle, which involves a woman in India said to be cured of a stomach tumor via Mother Teresa's power on the first anniversary of the nun's death. The woman's doctors disagreed, saying it was their drug treatment that cured Monica Bezra, and that her abdominal pain was caused by an ovarian cyst and tuberculosis. Even her husband, Sekou Bezra, told Time magazine in 2002, "It is much ado about nothing. My wife was cured by the doctors and not by any miracle." The second dubious miracle that led to her canonization concerned a Brazilian man who was suffering from a viral brain infection and said to be in a coma and dying in December 2008. After waking up symptom-free, the Vatican attributed the cure to the fact that the man's wife prayed for Mother Teresa's intercession. Now, the researchers do make the point that Mother Teresa undoubtedly inspired other people to do humanitarian work, which helped many sick and poor people around the world. Says Chanel, "When she began her work, we think she really wanted to help. The thing is, she wanted to help people to get closer to God. And in her mind, people need to suffer for that, just as Jesus suffered on the cross." End quote. But someone who preaches virtue in suffering as opposed to helping alleviate it, and who takes money from dictators, is not what comes to many people's minds when you hear the term saint, right?
No.
HuffPost associate editor Krithika Varagur writes in a recent piece titled "Mother Teresa is no saint," quote, "Mother Teresa was a martyr, not for India's and the global South's poor, but for white bourgeois guilt. The egregious fact is that one of the 5 Indian Nobel laureates was a woman who let sick people die." I guess the thing I want to bring up in all of this that really bothers me is this. I personally have no problem with anyone claiming to do God's work with good intentions and helping people who are less fortunate. But what I do have a problem with is that it almost always seems to preclude those people from any real scrutiny or criticism.
Darren, this must be right up your alley in terms of doing good better, no?
Yeah, I was listening to this and being especially frustrated because this sounds like an ineffective altruist or an effectively unaltruistic person, that they seem to have their own beliefs so strongly, which is that the poor must suffer, which for them gets them closer to God, we'll say, and then that is somehow positive. That's sort of, I guess, the internal rationale that I'm trying to be sympathetic towards. Even though in my worldview, that's horrible because suffering's bad. So having someone suffer more is bad. Not alleviating it is bad. And acting as if they do nothing is bad. And giving them some sort of shelter where they might have been helped, in theory, and then it turns out they weren't, is doing bad by doing nothing. It's the counterfactual. So yeah, it's exceptionally frustrating. And then her to be venerated. And then it's this weird thing that if most people don't know the details and they think she is positive, she might have inspired a lot of good people to be like Mother Teresa when they don't actually mean like Mother Teresa. No. So that's a more level of complexity that it could be in the real world she caused a lot of suffering, but the idea of Mother Teresa is positive. Unless you know this, then it's negative.
It's like a myth of a good saint.
I know when I was growing up, I wanted to be a saint. That's what a survey said. Isn't that right, Adam? Doesn't that make sense?
Didn't see it anywhere in my data. I read a terrible article on the Forbes website titled, "What 10 Common Childhood Dream Jobs Actually Pay?" This clickbait garbage was divided amongst 13 pages, which you have to click next, and this highlighted to me some limitations on how some people gather information, and I just wanted to touch on that a bit. The main flaw.
Are you sure that wasn't BuzzFeed, Adam?
It might as well. It might as well have been. It was kind of terrible. It was like article in pictures, and it was a sponsored Facebook post too. I'm like, which one of my friends posted this? It was like, oh wow, I clicked on an ad. This is so bad. The main flaw in this article was how they got that list of 10 childhood dream jobs. So before I get to that, a quick question for the panel: when you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up? I'll start with you, Darren.
Well, first, I like the idea of childhood dream jobs, as if child laborer could be one of those, depending on how you interpret it. I would like to be a chimney sweep in the 1800s and get cancer. Oh, reality bites. When I was a kid, I'm not sure I had a specific one as much as a general, maybe I want to be a fireman or maybe I want to be an astronaut. I don't remember like wanting to be a paleontologist or something like that, or a policy analyst / podcaster. It's all right. It's all right, come to think of it. But I don't remember specific childhood dream jobs that I had. I know that I wanted to be rich and drive a Ferrari and hang out and read books, apparently.
All right. Pat and Christina?
I wanted to do something with music.
Oh.
Honestly, ever since I was a kid, I either wanted to do music, like be a musician, or work in music, or work with musicians, and that's what I ended up doing.
Living the dream.
Cool. Pat?
I wanted to be Ace Frehley from Kiss. There's no question that from the time I was aware of Kiss, I wanted to be Ace Frehley from Kiss, and I tried really hard at it.
You kind of did for a while there.
And Adam, what about you?
Yeah, so, I mean, it varied. Astronaut, veterinarian, movie director, artist, comic artist, actor, computer programmer, which is kind of what I do today, but not really. But, so this wasn't a really scientific survey, but, you know, that was good enough for Forbes and good enough for the fine folks at LinkedIn that did this research. In 2013, LinkedIn did a survey of 8,000 of its users, which, you know, isn't by no means a random sample because they're people who are LinkedIn users, and they asked them what they had wanted to be when they grew up back when they were children. So this isn't really a good way of finding out what kids used to want to be. Our minds are biased, our memories are flawed. You know, the decision that a child could have made on what they wanted to be could have changed a number of times, and what you remember as wanting when you were a kid is going to change based on a number of factors, including what you ended up doing or what society these days respects more. So basically, what did these give us? Women's top 5 jobs were number 1, teacher, number 2, vet, number 3, writer, journalist, or novelist, number 4, doctor, nurse, or EMT, and number 5, singer. And the men's top 5, number 1, professional or Olympic athlete, number 2, airplane or helicopter pilot, number 3, scientist, number 4, lawyer, number 5, astronaut. This data seems like garbage to me. I can't imagine a child saying they want to be a lawyer when they grow up. Yeah, I mean, scientist maybe, because you don't really know what it means.
Also, they said astronaut, which is kind of like pilot and scientist. Stupid kids.
So I did a little informal survey of the children I know, so that's my girlfriend's kids and my niece and my nephew, to see what they thought a lawyer did. I got just a bunch of I don't knows, and I got one, they don't do anything, which I thought was funny. I can believe that maybe an adult on LinkedIn remembers having wanted to be a lawyer when they were a kid. I can maybe believe that a few kids who probably have parents that are lawyers may think they want to be a lawyer when they grow up, but that 5.9% of kids wanted to be lawyers when they grow up seems a little unlikely to me.
Not 6, of course. 5.9.
That's just the number they had. So maybe we want to instead ask ourselves, what do kids today want to be when they grow up? This is probably a better question. So I found some data from fatherly.com. They were a bit more thorough with 500 respondents aged 1 to 10. The top 10 jobs that they gave were professional athlete, doctor, don't know, teacher, veterinarian, firefighter, scientist, astronaut, engineer, and police officer.
I'm sorry to see that Ace Frehley slipped from the list.
So I was frankly surprised to see engineer on the list. So I asked my sample kids again what an engineer did, and none of them knew. Kids kind of have a simple understanding of jobs, and that's sort of a large contributor to what they want to do later. Most desk jobs seem boring to them. It's just reading and writing at a computer all day, and different desk jobs seem interchangeable just because they don't really know what people do. And as you grow older, your idea of what people do changes and what jobs are changes. So you kind of don't want to get stuck with what you wanted to do when you were 6 years old being your dream job. you want that to evolve as you get more knowledge of the universe. The research also focused on high female interest in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields over boys, suggesting we need to get ready for this wave of women entering these types of jobs. This isn't really a good survey to tell that. You need to look at data over time to make that determination. You want to look at interests of children changing over time to make that kind of determination. Young girls will often have a strong interest in STEM jobs, sort of despite what you've heard about the patriarchy trying to discourage women from doing it. But there's a lot of factors which will make them potentially not pursue a career. Some of that is society. Some of that is general interests. Women like working with people and living things. Men like working with inanimate objects. I'm talking general sense here. Men may pursue jobs that have monetary interests, while women may pursue jobs more for personal enjoyment, having a flexible work-life balance and things like that. So it's a complicated question, and you can't just say, look out, in 20 years, it's all going to be female engineers, and it's going to turn everything up on its head. Complicated question. So I can't tell you exactly what kids want to be when they grow up. I couldn't find any good research showing how much things may have changed over time. And there's certainly a lot of bad research on the topic out there, and sites like Forbes are happy to tell you about them.
In theory, you could do this better.
There are definitely better ways to ask kids, and asking kids over time, I think, would be interesting, because that's what at least the second article was trying to touch on, and I don't think it did a good job in the analysis. But the Forbes, LinkedIn study, this is potentially the worst way to try to gather data you could possibly think of, and widely reported amongst various news sources when this article came out. Not really useful or helping anybody be more knowledgeable about the topic.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks for joining us once again, listeners. I talked to you about whether your dog can understand you, and your dog can probably understand you a little bit, but they're probably mainly using context cues and everything else you say. Although some dogs can differentiate intonation from meaning as specific to rehearsed phrases with that particular dog, so it doesn't quite generalize as much as we hope. Cristina looked into the supposed saintliness of Mother Teresa, and it seems like just a little bit of digging shows she had, to be polite, suboptimal ways of helping people, meaning perhaps not really helping them in any conventional way that we would consider useful, which is quite saddening, despite her veneration. And Adam explored whether we can use good surveys to find out what kids want to be when they grow up, and in theory we could, but we don't. At least that's not the stuff we talk about in the media. Until next time, think better to act better.
Peace out for Haramboids.
Stay classy, not smartassy.
Good night, everyone.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Outtakes.
Who wouldn't want to be the guitar player for Kiss?
I want Pat to have all his comments be somewhat related but not relevant, and always just say that. No matter what anyone says. He's like, yeah, but what about the guitar player for Kiss?